Okay, kids, this is going to be a shop tour, just a kind of a quick around. I've got about 2,200 square feet, not a very big shop, and I'm just going to run through some of the tools and so on, and then I'll pull down some wood, and we'll talk a little bit about wood and some of the characteristics and some of my favorites, and we'll talk about some of the things to look for and how to decide what you want in wood. Obviously, you should play a lot of guitars with a lot of different woods and get a feel for kind of what their characteristics are. So let me grab the camera and we'll go around the studio here. This is my main workbench right there, and sitting up on that ledge are my main quick access tools, as well as this side of the bench, chisels and screwdrivers. There's my bridge clamps up there, so all sorts of goodies, storage. Got a little amplifier down under the counter to plug in guitars under the workbench there. Another big area for clamps. I've got all kinds of cam clamps and just every kind of clamp you can think of. You can never have too many clamps. Basically, more storage, routers and jigs and all sorts of things. But there are my forms that I will be using. Here's my current favorite, which is a Nick Lucas that I took off of a 1937 Gibson. Great body shape, gorgeous, really a tasty guitar. Again, more just storage, shelves, and there's some blank necks up there. My drill press. There's one of my low angle planes from Wood River. I really love my hand planes these days. There's an octave mandolin I'm building. Here's a nylon string guitar that I'm building right now. Abalone inlay around the sound hole. But look at that, rosewood is really pretty on that. I'm just getting the finish on it. And that top is redwood on that, which was a piece I bought off of eBay that had been on the forest floor forever. And I've had that myself for over 10 years before I built this guitar. I've still got more of it. It was a thick board, so I was able to cut a bunch of tops for it. Up here are, again, there's some more, there's wood. I've got some curly maple up there. There's some mahogany sets. There's a chop saw I use for a couple of different processes, but then it goes back on the shelf. It's just an inexpensive little chop saw set up to do certain things. Here's a tool that is going to be, I think, probably the hardest thing for you guys to get your hands on, in the sense that you got to thickness your wood, and this is what that is. That's a drum sander, a thickness sander. It's got a feed belt on it here, sandpaper on the drum, and then you can sand to your thicknesses. This isn't a common tool. It's not uncommon, but it's not something you're going to see in a lot of shops. A lot of times they'll have a plane, power planer, and that's more common, but it's not really a good option for what we do. Back behind there are some forms and some templates of necks and sides and all sorts of goodies. There's another view of my bandsaw, my big bandsaw. It's a 14-inch Icon, and I use that just to cut up sets. I'll find a board that I like and I'll cut it up and make sets out of it. That's a good way to save a lot of money buying sets. Up above there, as you can see, those are all sides sitting there. Those are all mostly tops in that pile. There's more wood up above. The second set over the second pile over there is mostly back and side, or backs to match the sides, rosewoods and mahoganies and so on. So, and then here's my my little benchtop bandsaw, which I love. I use that thing 100 times a day, and its cousin is the it's a 6-inch disc and a 4x36 belt sander. boy, between this and this, I do a ton of work. I make all my parts. They're just so handy. And they're so affordable. Both of these can be had for under a couple $100. I wouldn't be without those two tools. I can be without my big bandsaw, but those two. Down under here is a table saw. I never use the table saw for guitar building. I get it out when I need to make a frame for a friend's art or something, but I don't use it for building. Also, I have a oscillating spindle sander there, which we'll use a couple times. There's my side bending iron. It's I think 2.5-inch copper mounted on a board, and I put a torch in it, and I bend all my sides by hand. Again, there's some drills and more hand tools. This is my second workbench across the way from the first one. And again, another set of tools for just grabbing and going. More storage up above. This is actually right in this area is where I have my go-bar deck, and you'll see that as we get into the build. Again, more storage of wood and boxes of junk. And more storage. And then we come around this way, another door into the part of this building, and TV. You got to have TV late at night when you're back in the shop working. There's some more repairs, more storage, a desk with junk in it. You just can't have enough junk in your shop. So there you go. That's basically the shop tour. So let's talk about quarter sawing. I'm going to try and do this, but I'm going to draw it and then I'll show it to you. And can you see that? There you go. That's a log, and it would go this way, so like so. So there's your log. Now the term quarter sawing comes because the sawyer will take and cut this log right into like this, and then the next cut he's going to make is going to be, he's going to flip that over and cut right through there like that. So that then means he's quartered it. He's put it into 4 pieces. Now when he comes through, the grain lines are going to come around and they're going to go right straight up and down across the board. And then those lines would go this way. And so when you see your line straight up and down on the end of your board, then that tells you it's on the quarter. That means it's quarter sawn. And that's the strongest part of the board. So when we do things like braces in particular, we want those to be on the quarter. We want that grain line to stand straight up and down. And you'll see that as we get into the, we'll show that better as we're looking at our braces and so on. And you want your top wood to be on the quarter. Spruces, your cedars, your redwoods, all those sort of things. Again, you want to be able to look in the sound hole and of the guitar and see that the grain lines are going straight up and down like that. Sometimes they'll be a little off, but you don't want the grain lines going this way. That's called the slab cut. Now a certain amount of this, as you start to saw more and more boards, end up being slab cut because the grain's running this way through that board. But there's a certain percentage, and the sawyers know how to cut this stuff to get the maximum quarter sawn wood out of the spruce or whatever it is. Piano builders want quarter sawn for their soundboards and their bracing. Furniture makers like quarter sawn for strength. So there's an incentive to cut it so you get a premium amount of quarter sawn wood out of any log stuff. But we want stuff that's on the quarter here in this industry, in this business, to build with. And generally the stuff you're going to buy is, and again, I talked about finding stuff laying around your house, your flooring, your old bookshelves. Well, that's what you want to see, is this stuff running up and down at the end of the board. And that tells you it's on the quarter. And the tighter it is, the closer together, the more interesting it is. Don't use oak. I've seen one oak guitar in my life. Maple there's a lot of great maple, figured maple you see in flooring all the time. Of course, you don't use maple for your tops. It would only be a back and side wood. I'm not a big fan of maple, but I think that's because Gibson ruined me on maple. They put me off on maple. They built so many god-awful maple guitars in the day that you'd pick them up and you go, God, maple is terrible. I don't think it's the maple. I think it was Gibson, because I've played some maple guitars that were excellent guitars. But, man, Gibson made a lot of bad maple guitars and kind of put a sour taste in everybody's mouth about maple, I believe. So the other thing to talk just a bit about is, as concerns wood, is your top woods generally are a soft wood. That's from evergreens, your conifers. So anything that has needles, this is generalities, but with needles that don't fall in the winter, those are soft woods. Pines, spruces, cedars, those sort of things. Hardwoods are what they call deciduous, so they drop their leaves in the fall. And that's, again, walnut. I've made some great walnut guitars. I'm a fan of walnut. Cherry I like a lot. Again, maple, and those are domestics. But when you get into the mahoganies, the rosewoods, the babingas, and the African, those are all, again, deciduous. They drop their leaves, apparently. And they're hardwood. So that's kind of the general difference is. And there are domestic woods like walnuts and cherries that make great guitars. I had a student a year and a half or so ago made a cherry guitar, and it was just as sweet as could be. Great guitar. Everything about it works. And so think, if you're environmentally conscious, which we all need to be these days, there are a lot of good domestic, readily available, sustainable hardwoods that make great guitars. So think about all those kinds of things when you're trying to decide, and go play guitars. Ask the salesman, what kind of wood is this? And when he says that's mahogany, say great. When he says it's rosewood, say great. Those are going to be the two main woods you see, mahogany and rosewood. But there are a lot of others, and these days LMI and all the places have more and more varieties of woods that you would. When I started building 30 years ago, you saw mahogany and rosewood. That was it, basically, and Sitka for the top, maybe cedar. These days, there's a lot of woods that are quite good and make great guitars. I haven't obviously built with all those, but trust LMI and Allied and those guys when they give you a description about the wood, that they're putting you in the ballpark for what the wood's sonic characters are and its workability and those type of things. So this is sapelli. See the stripes? You can always tell sapelli, and these days it's used on so many of the imports, and it's often called mahogany or ribbon mahogany or some such thing. But that's what sapelli looks like, and I like it. It sounds fine. So that's sapelli. It's one of the less expensive woods available. This piece is also sapelli, but if you look at this, it's got a whole different figuring in it, and some people might call it quilted. Sometimes you hear palmel, it's called. So this is again, this is sapelli. This is an African mahogany. Now this is different. Sapelli and the African mahoganies, I think, are maybe in the same family. I'm not sure. But LMI, a few years back in their catalog, said African mahogany was virtually indistinguishable from Honduran mahogany in its look, in its feel, in the way it worked and sounded. And I absolutely agree. I love African mahogany, and again, you can get it relatively inexpensively. This piece has some really neat, really small flame in it, and it's really a light piece of wood. Here's a pretty piece of Honduran mahogany that's called beeswing, and you can see that it's got some nice figuring in it. This is dated. Whenever I buy wood, I always date it. This is from 2004, so it's 15 years old, whatever. So that's a really nice piece of beeswing mahogany, it's called. Look at there, you can see the figuring in that on that piece. Now this again, I bought this as a second, and I love seconds because it had a knot, and of course you work around most of that sort of stuff. Has the sapwood in the middle, and by the way, that's whenever you see the light wood, that's the sapwood it's called. And I love sapwood when I'm building guitars. There's nothing wrong with it, and it adds a detail, an aesthetic that I just really think's neat when you can have that light strip of wood in with the rest of the wood. Here is something I bought back in, what does it say, 2005, and this was called white mahogany at the time. I bought it at a local hardwood store, but it's also, I believe, limba. And you'll see black limba, and they're starting to sell black limba sets. And I've built a couple guitars with this, and it's absolutely wonderful. It's very mahogany-like in its feel and workability, but it's very white-looking. It's a good choice for a light white wood if you can find it. I don't see it listed much. Here's babinga. Babinga is often called African rosewood. It's not really a rosewood, but it's got kind of some of the striping you'd see in East Indian. It's also more red in color, and it's a fairly heavy wood too. It works fine. I've built a couple guitars with it. I don't know that I'd buy much more babinga, but. And this is apparently maybe even in the same family as the babingas. This is Ovan coal. You'll see in a lot of Taylor guitars are using a lot of Ovan coal. And it's very similar to, again, in feel and weight and workability, similar to the East Indian. Matter of fact, it's sitting right there. This is a piece of East Indian as well. So you can see how they're physically similar with the way the grain runs and so on, except for you can see the variations in the colors there. Again, Ovan coal, African. Okay, so here's, I wanted to show you a couple of sets of East Indian. Very typical. You see this on millions of guitars. The color, the grain lines, the way it looks. But now here's also a piece of East Indian. I just wanted to show you the difference in color you'll find in East Indian. This has more purple. This is more of the browns in it, more the purple, darker, and again, that's a nice piece of East Indian. I got that from Allied Luthier back in '06. They had a sale, and I bought 10 sets of this, and now it's what I gave for the 10 sets. One set sells for more than that now, back again in '06. So those are two East Indian rosewood sets. Here's I want to show you this set, because this is a set of mahogany, and it's going to be one of the sets I use to build right now. And boy, you can't quite see it, but this stuff is just loaded with figuring, with what we call flame, or there we go, you can see that now. And I mean, it runs the whole width of the instrument and clear up to the top. It is just packed with figuring, and that's my favorite. I love high flamed mahogany just for its look, and then mahogany is my favorite anyway, so that's just going to be fun to build. And here's going to be the match to that. Same stuff. And so I'm going to do a top, back, and sides with this mahogany, this high figured mahogany. So that's a real treat. And so that's the mahogany I'm going to use for one of my builds, and I think I'm going to use that other African mahogany for the other build. These are the sides for the highly flamed mahogany, so that's what I'll be using there. And I wanted to show you this. This is the Holy Grail of woods. This is Brazilian rosewood. You all probably know the story about Brazilian and how it's really all but not available anymore. You got to be careful if you build with it, where you travel with it. I don't have papers on this. Now, the story of this stuff is that my brother, who's a woodworker, found a big board that was at an auction, and it had been part of Illinois Power. They had bought to probably made office furniture out of it back in the 60s. And he got this board, and we were able to cut, I think, about 10 sets out of this. And it's the good old Brazilian. I mean, this is lovely stuff. Back in the day when Martin built guitars out of Brazilian, they would, there you go, you can see the grain is really straight here on this, and it's right on dead on the quarter as you're looking at this. And that's all you would ever see Martin build out of. This part of the wood, which is the slab, gets off the quarter. Nowadays everybody sells that as, oh, that's the fancy figured rosewood. Well, in the old days, Martin threw that stuff away. They didn't want these kind of swirly lines. You'll never see that on the old Martins. You always see the tight grained running this way on the quarter with Brazilian. So I haven't built with any of this Brazilian yet. I'm kind of afraid to. It's like what, and I don't know what to do with it. I don't know what kind of guitar I want to make with it. But that's the Holy Grail. I don't know what that would be worth today, but it's a lot of money. So there you go. This, now we're going to look at tops. This is red spruce, or Adirondack spruce they call it. I got this off of Vikewood. They're up in Wisconsin. I don't know if you can see there's this knot here. So I didn't pay very much for this. There's another knot there. But if you look at the inside, it's pretty clean. Again, what you would commonly be referred to as seconds, and I love seconds, especially on my tops. I buy this stuff all the time. You work around the knots, or you fill them, you do whatever, and it's just fine. This is a set they call Lutz. And again, notice the knot, the dark stripes in it. I don't know. I bought this back in 2010, so it's 9 years old already. But this will be a great top. John Grevin says that the Lutz, which apparently is a cross between Sitka spruce and Engelmann spruce, as I understand it, from the Pacific Northwest. People really like this. You're seeing it a lot these days. But John Grevin says it's the closest thing to the red spruce that he's found. He really likes this, apparently. If you don't know John Grevin, look him up. He's my hero. He builds a guitar a week. He's been doing that for 40 years or something, by himself in his one-man shop. Unbelievable. Okay, here's a piece of Sitka spruce that I got from LMI back in 1996. Again, this was probably, I bought it as a second because there would have been a knot there. But other than that, it's really pretty. It's got a lot of nice, what they call silking or modulary rays. And this would just be a great top. Here's a neat wood, and I've built a couple guitars with this on top, and this is called Alaskan Yellow Cedar. Also, you'll see Port Orford cedar, and both are good top woods, and apparently very similar in nature. Apparently, this wood is the least prone to cracking of any of the top woods we use. It has a real peppery smell. It smells great. It's kind of a yellow texture, color to it, but it's fine. It's a great wood. Here's a piece of torrified. Now this is spruce that was, they do something like put it in some kind of oven or microwave and make the resin all boil out and or make it harden and crystallize like an old guitar top would be. So this supposedly is you know, the next best thing. You'll see torrified wood tops on a lot of production guitars. I haven't built with it yet. I can't get excited about it, but I've got I bought a couple sets to have. It smells burnt when you put it up to your nose and smell it, but that again is just spruce. This is a set of cedar that I got back in 1999, it looks like. And boy, this stuff is so light. That'd make a great top. Again, there's little blemishes, but there's nothing wrong with this. This would be a great guitar top. Both steel string and nylon string. Here's a neat piece of wood. Matter of fact, this is the match to one of, I think I got 4 tops out of a board that I bought off of eBay, and it's the match. It's the match to this guitar, which I'm just finishing. I cut off the printout from when I bought this on eBay, and I bought it back in 2008. So again, it's 10, 11 years old, and it says it was salvage left over from the 1800s logging operation. Here's another piece of cedar, and I just wanted to show this because if you can see how the grain line goes like this, and it's not straight, and so I'm sure this probably would have been considered a second in its day, but it's tight grained, it's really light, it'd make a great top. Nothing wrong with this at all. Here's something fun. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Here's some more redwood. Now this, look, and again, kids, I want you to think about this. I want you to look around. But see how that is wedge shaped, and the reason it's shaped like that on the end is because it was siding, and it was put on a garage back in the 50s. As a matter of fact, this was some scrap from a friend of mine whose garage had been sided with redwood back in the 50s, and this was a piece still up in the rafters in the garage. Now it's not book matched, but it's wide enough I can get a small guitar out of this, and it's extremely tight grained. It's on the quarter. The idea there is, look around you. There's interesting woods all over the place. The fence that's out around my yard's made out of western red cedar. It's the same stuff as this, you know. And I can go to Menards or Home Depot and I can pick through the cedar for their fencing, and sometimes you find some pieces that are dead on the quarter and it's really tight grained. You know, it'll make a great guitar. This is called Doug Fir. I bought a board of this out at my local hardwood store, Owl Lumber. I'll give them a shout out. They're great up in Des Plaines. But this gets fairly tight grain. I've got a guitar. I've built a couple guitars with Doug Fir on the tops. I love them. It's not common, but boy, it's a monster guitar. Here's another piece of, again, look around, people. Recycle stuff. This is actually Doug Fir, tight grained. I don't know if we can get in on that, but it was flooring, and so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces you can see across there. But that'd make a great top. That will just, look at that side, it's much cleaner. You don't see that was everything up when it was glued together to look better. But again, tight grain, Doug Fir, very cool. Flooring, tear up your floors, make a guitar top out of it. And then this was I'm going to use this stuff for this build. This was a pine board that was in a bookshelf that I just tore apart within the year. And I know the bookshelf I know the wood in that bookshelf's 50 years old at least. But when I took this apart, this stuff was dead on the quarter. Again, I don't think we can show it here. And it's so tight grained, and it's pine. Again, there's knots there, but I'm going to make a 3-piece top out of this. There's the painted side of the bookshelf. But I'm gonna laminate up 3 pieces of this, because from here in is extremely tight and dead on the quarter. So I'm gonna put 3 of these. This stuff's really light and it's got a great tap tone. So there you go. That's from a bookshelf. Okay, kids, if you like and use or find these videos interesting, educational, informative, or maybe just entertaining because you're up late at night, we'd love to have you support us. There's a few ways you can do that. One is click the subscribe button below. That helps YouTube know what we're doing and that we're serious about this. Also, you can hit that bell icon, which tells you when the next videos are coming out. We're gonna try and get at least 1 out a week now that we're up and running here. Also, a good way to support us is become a patron over at our Patreon account. And again, there's a link below for that. Patreon's a cool way that you can sign up and give, you know, $5 a month or $10 or whatever you feel is worth it. If you're using these videos to actually build a guitar and find it interesting and fun, please support us through Patreon. That's you know, I wish I could do this completely for free, but it takes money and time away from my other regular job. So, you know, it's a big undertaking, and any support you could send this way is great. So, you know, it's all been very fun so far for me, and I hope you guys are having fun at this as well, and we greatly appreciate all your support, so thanks.